Am I the JRK for considering splitting up and co-parenting instead of trying to fix my marriage? When my husband, he's 28, and I'm 26, decided to have a baby, I thought everything was going great. We were happy together and had enough money to support our family. But then my pregnancy turned out to be risky, and I had a lot of health problems. I had to use most of my medical leave even before the baby was born. So my husband and I decided that I'd quit my job to become a stay-at-home mom for a while after our son was born. But things didn't turn out as expected. After the baby arrived, I struggled with postpartum depression and severe anxiety. On top of that, I faced complications during recovery, and I didn't have any support from my family. I was pretty much on my own, especially since my mother-in-law had passed away, and my father-in-law wasn't interested in helping. My husband expected me to handle everything at home and with the baby by myself because I was now a stay-at-home mom. He stopped helping out around the house or with our son, leaving me feeling overwhelmed and lonely. Thankfully, I found some support through a mom's group, which helped me cope with the stress and isolation. But then, when our son was 10 months old, I discovered messages on my husband's phone suggesting he was having an affair. It explained why he was always working late. During that time, my mental health took a nosedive and I became terrified that my husband would divorce me and take our baby away. Instead of feeling angry with him, I was consumed by fear. It was like my love for him had vanished, replaced by sheer terror. I couldn't bring myself to confront him about his affair, and he had no clue that I was aware of it. I just buried myself in dealing with my own issues while constantly dreading the possibility of being kicked out without my son. Looking back, I realize now that my assumption wasn't rational. I had rights, but in that moment my mind was stuck in a state of panic. I ended up moving into my son's room, separating myself from my husband, all while still fulfilling my duties as a stay-at-home mom. The sad part is, I didn't even realize I had abandoned our shared bedroom. Despite the turmoil, I kept the household running smoothly. I cooked, cleaned, and took care of our son without complaint, even though my husband seemed indifferent to my presence. When our son turned 2, I decided to get a job, which meant putting him in daycare. My husband wasn't supportive of this change. He preferred things the way they were and wasn't willing to contribute financially to childcare. Regardless, I went ahead and found employment anyway. Now, the majority of my paycheck goes towards daycare expenses, with the rest allocated for my car payments and a tiny bit for savings. Recently, my husband has been spending more time at home and has been acting despondent. I discovered that his affair partner ended their relationship, and suddenly he wants to pretend like the past 3 years never happened. He's seeking intimacy and a return to a regular relationship with me. I expressed to my husband that our marriage was effectively over when he neglected our relationship and pursued affairs. I made it clear that if his first affair didn't work out, he could just move on to the next one. His response was to accuse me of being a cold-hearted gold digger, which was incredibly hurtful. Despite the pain he put me through, I'm still here because of my love for our son and my desire to be with him every day. I'm not seeking 50% custody. I just want to raise our son. I've come to terms with our living situation and have accepted the idea of living separately from my husband, essentially as roommates while co-parenting our son. I don't concern myself with who he dates, loves, or sleeps with. If circumstances change in the future, such as when our son is in school and less dependent on me, or if I happen to fall in love with someone else, then I may consider filing for divorce. My husband seems to believe he's the victim in all of this, but I've consulted with a divorce lawyer and know what I'm entitled to. Half of the equity in our house, half of his financial assets, child support, and shared expenses for our son's needs. Right now it's more convenient for me to continue living in the house with our son. He's arguing that because I didn't address the affair when I first found out about it, I have no right to bring it up now that it's over. Even my parents agree with him, saying that by ignoring the affair I forfeited my right to be upset about it later. My husband is suggesting marriage counseling, but I don't see the point. The only options I find acceptable are maintaining the current living arrangement or getting a divorce. Wow, I'm blown away by the support and empathy in these comments. It's reassuring to know that I'm not alone in feeling this way. The consensus seems to be clear: divorce him. It's disheartening to hear that my parents are siding with him, even after everything he's done. I've considered the messy process of divorce, and honestly, it's overwhelming, especially with all the other responsibilities I have. Finding a new place to live feels like another daunting task on top of everything else. Right now, it doesn't seem beneficial for me to pursue that option. But if he's willing to do the legwork and handle the logistics, then I'm more than willing to sign the paperwork with my lawyer. However, taking the first step on my own feels intimidating, especially with my parents' lack of support. Their attitude makes it hard to ignore the doubts creeping in. I've also contemplated sticking around for a few more years until our baby is older, and I can secure 100% custody. It would provide a sense of stability and comfort for both me and my child. My husband's accusations of me being a gold digger because I didn't confront him about his affair, and my desire to co-parent rather than be his wife seem completely unfair. Honestly, his suggestion of marriage counseling feels like a slap in the face. After 3 years of neglect and infidelity, it's hard to believe he's suddenly interested in working on our marriage. He checked out a long time ago, and now he wants to sweep everything under the rug like nothing happened. It's definitely strange for him to label you as a gold digger when he barely contributes financially, especially when it comes to providing for your child. I totally understand your panic about finding a job and the challenges of getting back into the workforce after taking time off. It's a long-term plan, and finding the right opportunity can take time. You're being proactive by seeking legal advice, especially regarding alimony and child support. It's frustrating that the system doesn't always keep up with the cost of living changes and inflation. The potential fight over equity in the house sounds exhausting and may not even be worth it in the end, considering the legal costs involved. It's a tough decision to make, especially when it could take years to resolve. It sounds like you're facing a lot of financial uncertainties, especially with the added expenses of childcare. Going back to school would be a great opportunity, but it's understandably challenging with a young child to care for. I'm glad to hear that you're considering couples counseling as a way to improve your co-parenting arrangement. It's important to prioritize your child's well-being and find ways to navigate your relationship with your husband, even if it's in a different capacity. Hang in there, and I hope things improve for you soon. He told a counselor that he still wants our marriage to get better. We had a good organized talk, which was helpful. We were asked to talk about things that bother us. For me, it's obviously the years of him cheating, but there's also the neglect, him not helping out, being away from home a lot, and me paying for our son's daycare all by myself. His list of complaints was pretty surprising. He blames me for making his experience of becoming a dad bad because I was stressed and anxious. He thinks my pregnancy issues were just drama. When we agreed I'd stay home with our son until he started school, he imagined a perfect family where I'd take care of everything for him. He's mad because reality didn't match his fantasy, and he's convinced I tricked him. He's selfish, but he's also been encouraged by others, even my own parents. It's tough realizing that my parents don't really love or respect me. Our son was sickly at first and he clung to me a lot. Now that he's healthy and more interested in playing with his dad, my husband resents me for that too. It's been really tough for me, so I've started therapy again to help me deal with it all. I had become numb to my husband's actions, a defense mechanism I learned growing up with neglectful parents. I focused on my son, ignoring the problems in my marriage, but my husband managed to reopen all those wounds. Ironically, despite the stress, I lost a lot of weight and look more put together now that I'm physically recovered. Despite his attempts to make me feel inadequate, I've come to terms with the situation and filed for divorce. It'll take some time for everything to finalize, so I'll stay in the house until we sell it and divide the assets. It's absurd how he blames me for having a difficult pregnancy, as if I did it intentionally to spite him. His behavior is beyond selfish, it's narcissistic. He thinks he's the center of the universe and has a warped view of reality. It's clear to me now that divorcing him is the right decision. I'm only sorry that my son will have to be around him, as I don't believe he'll be a positive influence. I appreciate your concern and support. Starting therapy for myself has been helpful, and I believe I deserve a loving partner in the future. As for my choice in men, I admit I missed the signs with my current husband. But moving forward, I'll be more cautious than selective. Thank you for your advice. It means a lot to me. It's often said that people might end up with partners who resemble their parents, even if those parents weren't the best role models. I really hope you find someone who treats you right because you deserve it. It's pretty crazy how my husband thinks he's to blame for our baby getting sick. He even went as far as to believe that our son preferred me over him, like it was some sort of training I did. The reality was much simpler. I just followed a method to help ease our son's discomfort from his GERD. But his dad couldn't quite get the hang of it. So, naturally, the baby preferred the one who could comfort him best. It's baffling to me how I didn't see my husband's true colors from the start. We were happy before I got pregnant and he seemed like a great partner and dad to be. But now it's like he's a completely different person, showing his true narcissistic traits. Leaving him was definitely the right decision, but I can't help but wonder what our couples counselor made of all his nonsense. Our counselor usually just asks questions instead of giving statements. But at one point, I had to ask my husband why he thought my mother, who barely saw me during my pregnancy, knew more about my medical needs than my actual doctor. It's just mind-boggling. I found myself in a frustrating argument where I kept downplaying the concerns raised by my doctor, even though I had clear documentation of diagnoses and recommendations. My mother has a habit of dismissing my needs and concerns, so it's no surprise that she didn't take my health issues seriously. Despite knowing this, my husband still chose to believe her over me. It's just another example of how my mother always undermines me and makes me feel like I'm exaggerating or making things up. It's exhausting. On a completely different note, I need some advice. My wife and I have been together for 5 years and we've been married for 1. We were trying to have a baby, but we recently stopped after she had a miscarriage. Then a few months ago, she told me she was pregnant again, but the baby was conceived through an attack. She's been going through a really tough time and has been distant, even though I've been doing everything I can to support her. I got her into therapy and she quit her job, so I've been the sole breadwinner. I was devastated when she told me she wanted to keep the baby and hoped I would help raise it with her. I don't know what to do. My sister grew up in a similar situation and it was a really difficult upbringing. My mother was abusive and my sister suffered a lot because of it. I'm worried that my wife may have some unresolved issues and could potentially resent the child. I'm not saying she would harm the baby, but I'm concerned about the impact it could have on both of them. What should I do in this situation? Am I being too harsh? She got mad and said she would do that. I just told her, okay. She asked again if I would help her raise the child. I told her to let me think about it, so I did. And I told her I would as long as I get it in writing that if we ever, which I hope not divorced, that I would not have to pay for that child. I would like the role as a stepfather rather than a real one, and that I would want my own kid as well. A few years later, she said yes to the first 2, but no to the last one. Then I said, it's a deal breaker. I said, I understand. You may not want to put your body through that again, but I want to buy your child as well, not an offender's child. I told her to think about it and let me know what you decide. She took time to think and still said the same thing, and that I will not make her have another child. I said, okay, and that we can start the divorce process whenever you're ready if that's your final decision. Most people are on my side, but my sister thinks I should just adopt a child and divorce. My wife, would I be the a-hole if I didn't stay? Edit. So a lot of people are asking, why are you going to treat this child like a stepkid? The dad is white, my wife is Hispanic, mixed with white, so it's going to be a white baby. I'm African American mixed with Mexican and my dad is a darker Mexican. So yes, the child is going to know it's white. Now for the top comments. She already knows if she loves this baby or not. Refusing to see hypothetical baby as her own. When you will be the only father in the newborn's life, already treating the kid as less than it's a rejection, since the child won't have another father, stepfather. Relationships are for when a guy comes into an older child's life or aren't in their life consistently. So yes, if you will be rejecting the kid, you shouldn't be part of their life. But the way you described everything is like you are aiming at being cruel. It's your presentation. Mature choices that I'm objecting to. The kid is going to very obviously know is not mine. Especially when it gets older like mine. It's going to know. So the kid won't care as long as you have loved him/her. Have you been around little kids? If not, I'm going to tell you a story about me and my sister. So we look very different. She's a lot darker than me and has black curls. So when I was 14, she was 7. She didn't really understand that we had different dads, but she always used to ask how come my hair was a lot looser than hers and why I was lighter than her. I used to say genetics, but she used to see my dad's other kids sometimes mentioning that something was up, that she didn't look like the rest of us. So by 8 I told her that she had a different father and I just told her he died. I eventually told her the truth, but still kids notice things like that. So her at that young age, she cared. Why didn't she look like me? She wants to keep it. You don't want to be part of this. No angels here, not the whole. If you leave us, we don't want to raise a child that isn't yours, not the asshole. If she chooses to raise the child of a man who assaulted her, you are not obligated to step up. Also, don't wait on her, to want to start a divorce. If you wait too late, they will automatically consider a child yours. My sister thinks I should just adopt the child to divorce my wife. No offense, but your sister sounds very stupid for this comment. Sister does not sound stupid, just her spouse traumatized. You sound ignorant. Opus's sister was a child of an abusive relationship. Her mother was handed her presumably because she reminded mom of the abuser, and so mom starved her, and beat her. Sister is likely empathizing with a child in that situation and is afraid that Hope's wife will model the same behavior her mom did. She likely feels the child would be safer with Opie, who wasn't abused, not alone. Another thing to consider is that depending on where you live, the right might be able to apply for and receive parental rights, meaning his back in both of your lives. Does your wife realize that also depending on where you live? Married couples have what's called presumed parentage, basically, and a child born within the wedlock is their husband's child, regardless of her cheating. Some men have only been able to get their rights reversed, meaning they have no rights to a relationship with a child. But they still have to offer a financial support, opus, get a lawyer, any documents they'll make up and sign. Any verbal agreement is irrelevant. The law is typically clear on this mother a whole. That is beyond sad, especially the cheating parts. Our laws are so outdated. It's crazy. There are literally thousands of men who have raised their children, found out they're not biologically theirs, had all rights removed, sometimes by despite blacks, not even through their own actions, large court requests, and still have to pay 15 to 30% of their income into the child's early adulthood. The state gets federal kickbacks in putting man on child support. It's a hell of a system. Presumed parentage is 110% bias, and it's cases like these and divorces where men lose everything they have to a cheating spouse that makes men start disengaged from marriage. And it's so sad. As a married woman, I think DNA tests should be mandatory.